Red Bull is not a stranger to Formula One and its fans. Max Verstappen has won many titles that add glory to the name of Red Bull. But the only cloud is the penalty for breaking the budget cap in 2021. And this penalty is going to cause trouble for Red Bull next year. Was winning the 2021 driver's title worth risking losing both titles in 2023 for Red Bull? Was this a severe punishment or a lenient punishment for the offense? Aren't you curious to know about the penalty? Well, let's find out. During the Mexican Grand Prix weekend, Formula One FIA received confirmation of Red Bull's punishment for exceeding the budget cap in 2021. A $7 million punishment and a 10% restriction in its aerodynamic testing allowance for the next 12 months were imposed as a penalty for the brand. A 10% may feel insignificant, but friends, it is not. The 10% reduction in the wind tunnel time they received could be far more serious than you might think. Red Bull breached the $145 million budget cap by $1.8 million and is the only team to do so. The expenditure was committed in 4 major areas: catering, sick pay, unused spare components, and the issue of UK tax rebates. The team had previously committed to an overspend of $5.6 million, which was cut to $1.8 million after clarifying discussion with the regulatory body about overspending issues. It resulted in a $3.8 million savings. Thus, in addition to what the financial regulations call a small breach, which means less than $5 million, the team committed a procedural violation by failing to submit its final reports by the March 31st deadline. Again, in trouble, right? However, the FIA has verified that Red Bull has resolved this through an accepted breach agreement, ABA. It means that the team admits wrongdoing and receives financial and sporting penalties rather than more severe punishments, such as point deductions or disqualifications from the championship. The Red Bull team, led by manager Christian Horner, initially denied exceeding the cost cap limit, but has now effectively accepted doing so through the ABA, mainly due to the disputes in interpreting the regulations. Red Bull does not actually lose $7 million in performance spending because the penalties are not reduced from the current budget limit. But the only loss incurred is in the deduction in allowance for CFD and aerodynamics. So what does this mean? Reduction in aerodynamic allowance will result in less time for wind tunnel tests, which is crucial to analyze the car's performance. The wind tunnel time for the year is calculated on a sliding scale. It's based on the championship position at the end of the previous season and is reset each year on June 30th. It's based on 40 runs per week or 100%, and since Red Bull was the Constructors' champion in 2022, they'll have 70% wind tunnel next time until June 30th. So after a 10% reduction as a penalty, the brand will have 63% wind tunnel testing time till June 2023. Let me put this simply. Red Bull will get less time for wind tunnel tests than other competitors. Due to this, the time available for upgrades and development will be less. So Red Bull will have 16 wind tunnel runs lesser than their nearest rival, Ferrari, and 32 runs lesser than Mercedes. Considering the CFD, it'll be like 100 items lesser than Ferrari and 200 lesser than Mercedes. But Red Bull clarifies that these are not really game-changing numbers for them. Red Bull's limitation is effective for 12 months, following the completion of the agreed breach agreement on Wednesday, October 26. That means Red Bull's new limit is effective immediately and will apply to any development work completed in the fourth quarter of 2022. That means the last stages of Red Bull's 2023 vehicle development will be impacted. And because this will continue until the end of October next year, Red Bull will also be limited in balancing its wind tunnel and CFD allotment over next year in season development and any early work on 2024 design. What will you look for in your opponents to defeat them? Obviously for their weakness and faults, right? The story's not different for Red Bull too. Their close rivals, Ferrari and Mercedes, are putting effort into taking advantage of Red Bull's penalty. The rivals argue that FIA's penalty for Red Bull is too lenient. But Christian Horner, the principal of Red Bull Racing, claims that the penalty they have gotten is draconian. He also criticized that the rivals are pushing so hard for a draconian penalty for Red Bull to have a competitive advantage. We operate out of a wind tunnel that is actually a listed building. It's a relic of the Cold War. It's not a state-of-the-art wind tunnel that our competitors enjoy. It was built in the 1950s. It has its own limitations when it's either too cold or too hot at getting the conditions and the operating temperature right. So therefore, a penalty like this is a hugely draconian, says Horner. Ferrari feels the millions overspent by Red Bull corresponds to a performance gain of 0.2 seconds per lap. For competitions like racing, each millisecond is crucial. So Ferrari claims that for an advantage of 0.2 seconds, the penalty they got now is not enough. Ferrari argues that a 10 reduction in the wind tunnel and CFD time does not correspond to the same amount of lap time, despite what Horner says. Anyhow, the close competitors of Red Bull, both Ferrari and Mercedes, have enough potential to gain the same performance as that of Red Bull with the development of 2023 cars. The fewer wind tunnel tests for Red Bull also aid other teams' advantages. Hey, pause for a second. What if these rivals failed to develop their sports car as expected? No doubt, Red Bull's performance would then stay at the top, and this penalty will not make much difference for them in competitions. So what do you think, guys? Should Mercedes and Ferrari focus more on their work, or should they waste time arguing against Red Bull? Shoot your opinions in the comments below. Formula One fans are wondering now whether their favorite star, Max Verstappen, would be a huge problem in 2023 racing. We cannot forget what Red Bull has gained in the field since their dominance in 2013. Following a podium finish in 2006, the team hit their pace in 2009, winning 6 races and finishing second in the constructors' standings. They were a phenomenal success over the next 4 seasons, winning consecutive title doubles between 2010 and 2013, with Sebastian Vettel becoming the sport's youngest quadruple champion. They are now recapturing that glory with the equally thrilling youngster Max Verstappen. The team set the world record for the fastest pit stop at the 2019 Brazilian Grand Prix with a timing of 1.82 seconds, while servicing Max Verstappen, which they still hold as of October 2022. The race drivers of Red Bull for the 2023 Formula One World Championship are Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. Red Bull holds 5 Constructors' Championships, 6 Drivers' Championships, and 92 race victories. With such a legacy, why would Red Bull have accepted a breached agreement instead of trying to fight it? Have you ever thought so? So, first, accepting the ABA penalty actually helps the team avoid getting other serious penalties. In fact, if Max Verstappen hadn't won the 2021 title, Red Bull probably would have pursued its case further, which suggests there was at least an implicit threat of losing last year's championship. So clearly Red Bull accepted the agreement because they couldn't lose the World Championship title. According to Red Bull, the draconian penalty would cost anything from a quarter to a half second of lap time. But after winning the 2022 Constructors' Championship, Red Bull was already destined to have the least amount of development time for the 2023 car. So it seems like the penalty may not affect them. In fact, why should you worry when you have the best designed car for the race? So there's only the least possibility of danger for Max Verstappen and his company in the upcoming years. Which team will benefit if Red Bull falls from the first position in the next years? Do you think it's Mercedes? What is your opinion about Red Bull exceeding their budget limit? Are they playing fair or not? We'd love to know your opinions in the comment section below. If you liked our video, hit the like button. Want to get more updates about the F1 world? Then subscribe to our channel and enable the notifications.